righty. Good morning, everyone. And I want to thank all of our district managers and staff who are on this Zoom today. Today, we are pleased to be joined by the Department of Sanitation and National Grid. Let's jump right into our presentations. We are officially 2 weeks away from the start of winter, which for us New Yorkers means it's time to keep our salt and shovels on standby. Definitely don't look forward to that this year. It's hard on my back last winter. But this morning, we are pleased to be joined by Nicholas Socorro, who is the Assistant Director of Community Affairs at DSNY. Nicholas has worked for the Department of Sanitation for 6 years, beginning as a Queens liaison, so boop, boop. Nicholas will now present us with an overview of the department's snow operations for the upcoming 2021 to 2022 snow season. Welcome, and yes, borough presidents have to shovel their snow as well. All righty, take it away, Nicholas.
Thank you, Borough President. And I know we don't look forward to the snow, but looks like we might even get a little bit of snow on Thursday. So we're planning to. It's a good timing to come here and talk a little bit about our snow plan. I'm joined by Chief Azara from Queens West and Chief Leahy from Queens East. They'll be happy to answer any and all questions anyone might have regarding specific district questions. I'm going to go through our basic snow presentation that we've done the past few years here with a few minor tweaks to account for some of the new equipment that we got this year for bike lanes and brine trucks, stuff like that. Most everybody here has seen this presentation a few times, so I won't belabor it. But before I go into the presentation, I just wanted to show, just in case anybody isn't aware or might not know where they can get all this information that we'll talk about today, nyc.gov/snow has everything related to the department snow protocol. We've got our snow FAQ, open restaurant guidance, everything you need to know. And then if you go to snow planning, the presentation we're going to give today is uploaded on the site. And we also have the final borough snow plan there as well for you to view. So anything you might need, you could find on that site. And now we will go into the presentation. All right. I always like to start with the how far we've come, just to see from back in 1979, 1980 snow plan. Back then our system was arterial, primary, secondary, tertiary, and folks on those tertiary streets were expected to have their streets cleared in 3 to 6 days. So now everybody pretty much gets their streets cleared multiple times in the first 24 hours. Obviously 3 to 6 days would be completely unacceptable for 99% of all New York City residents. So we have come a long way in improving the efficiency of our snow removal system from that time. For us, snow removal is an all year round planning process. We really are thinking about procuring salt, making sure we have our trucks are in working order, making sure we have plows, making sure the routes are good. That's why you see folks out in September and October with the plows on the trucks driving the routes. It really is an all year round planning process. In November, we begin night plow. For anybody who doesn't know what night plow is, we have increased manpower on all shifts as opposed to just the majority of manpower on the 6 to 2 shift. So if any residents call and say, oh, I usually get picked up at 9 in the morning, they're not here yet, it is possible. You can check in with me or one of the borough chiefs to see if their route has been changed to a different shift because of night plow. We try and rotate it to different sections every year. And unfortunately, some residents are gonna have their collection times changed. So you can always reach out. It happens every single year. It's nothing new. We just need to let them know, place their material out after 4 p.m. the night before, and it will get serviced. We have 6,300 sanitation workers receiving training in the fall. They're out there in October. There's about a 12-week span from September and October where they're out there driving the routes, making sure the streetscape hasn't changed. With open restaurants, we want to make sure that the trucks are able to fit down the streets, make sure none of them are encroaching farther than they should be, make sure we can identify any potential problems before we get into the snow season when we need to respond to a storm and it's too late. So once the snow forecast is more than 2 inches, we go into our split shift, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We begin getting salt in the trucks. We begin putting plows on the collection trucks. Salt, as soon as it starts snowing, we begin salting the street. Not the same for plowing. Obviously, if the plows have a little bit of lift. So once we get 2 inches of snow is when we begin actually plowing. But salting is crucial to making sure that the snow doesn't stick to the ground and we don't have, it prevents icing. So we get that out there pretty proactively with salt at the first sign of frozen precipitation.
Nick, before you move on to the next slide, we would appreciate the Mets Stadium being in the background next time.
You know, that's a good point.
All right.
I'll make a second presentation.
Just know you're presenting the Queens. All right.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. In 2019, we piloted brine application. It's basically just liquid salt in some areas like high priority locations and areas where the streetscape wasn't efficient for salt for one way or another. It wasn't sticking to the street, it was rolling down, and brine turned out to be very effective. Again, just basically liquid salt, but just another way of proactively getting out there and making sure that streets are safe. Another tool in the toolbox for us. So now we have an anti-icing fleet of over 30 vehicles, and we have 7 brine storage tanks throughout the city with about 68,000 total gallons of brine. Once we get 2 inches of snow, we begin our plow operations. So the plows do not scrape the street. Residents might reach out and say, my street isn't blacktop. That's not, it's not what they should expect. They should expect it to be safe and passable. And for the accumulation to be 2 inches or less, we're not going to scrape the street with our plows and pop manhole covers and ruin the street. So they just need to be expect that there'll be a little bit of layer of snow. Plows are fixed to the right. Obviously, there are two-way roads on all these routes. There are 2 lanes on all these routes. So you can't just plow into the left and plow into oncoming traffic or plow into this next lane of traffic. This is an important note for everyone, because I'm sure you're going to get a lot of calls about my block not being plowed, and you reach out. We always send it to operations, to the borough chiefs, and let them know so they could get eyes on the location. But the plows will operate continuously on their route. They will not be diverted to address specific 311 complaints. That said, we do use the 311 complaints as we'll bring them up in our operations room and look at them and see for situational awareness. Where are we getting a lot of 301 complaints? Let's get eyes on that location. What's going on there? Maybe there's a stuck truck. Maybe there's a car stuck there. Maybe it needs to be towed out. So we do encourage residents to call, but they should not expect that we're gonna divert a truck to go service that location. The trucks will just continually operate on their route until the snowstorm is complete. Currently on our website that I just showed you, nyc.gov/snow, you can find information on the snow laborers. DOT and DSNY is currently recruiting for snow laborers to assist with a lot of the pedestrian infrastructure. Obviously, the pedestrian infrastructure is voluminous. There's thousands of bus stops, thousands of crosswalks, fire hydrants. It's very difficult for us to get to all of them. We do rely heavily on the partnerships with New York City residents, property owners, building managers, to try and clear the fire hydrants and a lot of these areas that are in front of their property too. But we also have snow laborers to assist with that. We also use haulsters and skid steers to get some of the bus stops. They're the smaller equipment, like they look like little bobcats. So those are typically what we use for the pedestrian infrastructure. Once we shift Once we complete the roadway is when we begin to shift towards the pedestrian infrastructure. We work closely with DOT in developing guidance for open restaurants. We obviously, it blocks our curb access in a lot of areas, but we were able to successfully make it through last winter without too many hiccups. We just want the business owners to use common sense and understand that when there's a snowstorm coming, they should be protecting their patrons. They should be protecting these structures that they invested money in, and making sure that they have areas clear and safe during snow emergencies. So protected bike lanes for FY22, we were funded for an additional 30 pieces of equipment to clear snow from protected bike lanes. Again, we really want to reiterate for folks that plan on using it after a snowstorm that, you know, it's still not going to be perfectly blacktop, just like the street. Residents should be using safety measures to make sure they're not going to, you know, riding their bike and it could be potentially icy or slushy. We will get to these locations and clear them, but, you know, just like cars, it's slippery for cars. Following a storm, it could be slippery for bikes too. So we want people to be safe out there when they're trying to commute through the bike lane. If there's any massive snowstorm that we have, we'll do snow clearing operations, which is a front end loader with a melter, where we have our melting sites, which you could find in the snow plan, and they'll be transporting using a front end loader and dumping into snow melter, but that's only when there's huge piles of snow. This is a look at some of our snow equipment, you know, the salt spreaders and trucks, but then you see the holsters, which are for the smaller hilly streets. They just look like a pickup truck. The skid steer in the middle is the smaller piece of equipment that we use for bike lanes and bus stops and more narrow operations. And then the front end loader and melter for snow clearing. As we mentioned before, salt is probably our most effective tool that we use to keep the streets as safe and passable as possible. We have over 300,000 tons of salt on hand and contracts for an additional 600,000 tons. We have to make sure every snow season that we have a large supply. Obviously, the Northeast, you have a lot of competition for salt. So New York City, we need to make sure New York City has enough and we're ready to go into every single snow season. For those that are unaware of our snow route, like I mentioned in the first slide, where it was arterial, primary, secondary, tertiary, we don't do that anymore. It's been about 5 years, I think, 4 or 5 years since we switched over to critical and sector. So the critical routes are basically still those primary streets, highways, major thoroughfares, locations that have schools, hospitals, and the sector routes is everything else, all the neighborhood routes. Now, in the old system, you used to have, they get the arterial, then they go to primary, secondary, tertiary, and that was how they did it. Now, critical and sector operate at the same time. There might just be different equipment assigned to, like more equipment assigned to the critical routes at one point as they're in sector. They're all designed to be complete in roughly the sector routes, roughly 3 to 4 hours. It helps reduce, as you can see, in a lot of the old routes, you'd have streets that were on both critical route and the tertiary route for traveling. It just had a lot of redundancies and a lot of overlap. So having all these sector routes makes it way more efficient. It makes it way easier to operate on the routes continuously, and it helps decrease some of that overlap and redundant travel mileage that we saw previously. All of our trucks now have turn-by-turn navigation, which helps folks. We know exactly where the previous driver ended his shift and where the route can be picked up by the new driver hopping in the truck after he starts his shift. And you know, a lot of these folks might not be, they've practiced on the routes, but you never know in a snow emergency. We want to make sure that everybody, if they're not as familiar, this makes it as easy as humanly possible for them to operate on the route. They could basically do it without even ever being in the neighborhood. this is what I was referring to before. It's our GPS command center and operations. So they'll be looking at city cameras, they'll be looking at the 311s, which is why I had mentioned that while we might not divert, while the snowstorm's ongoing, if we get a big pocket in a certain neighborhood of 311 complaints, they're monitoring it, and then they'll get eyes on, they'll reach out to the borough. The borough will try and get eyes on it, and we'll be able to use that information in a beneficial way and try and problem solve. This is Plow NYC. I'm sure everybody is very familiar with Plow NYC. The streets are all color coded based on the amount of time that has elapsed since a plow had been down your street. It is fairly accurate. We've been working with Do It to make sure that there used to be issues where if a street turned and the GPS, like on the truck, basically it would have a false positive that a street had been plowed. It's been much better. We've been working with them year after year to try and get their algorithms working as good as possible. It is very accurate. It also tells you if a street is private or public. A lot of people reach out to me every year saying, oh, you know, this resident called about their street not being plowed, and it turns out it's a private street. So you can find all that information on Plow NYC. Obviously, if still I also get this too every year as well, where it says there was a plow down the street and potentially it has been a false positive. You always reach out to myself and share that information with me, because we'll get somebody out there, supervisor out there to look at the street and make sure that if residents are complaining that a plow hasn't been down, but Plow NYC says they have, we want to try and verify that as soon as possible. This is just a note on for residents and building managers, businesses, when they have to clear the snow. We're not going to, our folks aren't out there the second that enforcement period begins to start issuing summonses, but you know, a day or two after, we want to make sure the sidewalks aren't icy, they haven't frozen over, that they're clear. Residents walking to the subways and to the bus stops and just walking to the stores in the neighborhood have a safe passage to get there. If the snowstorm ends between 5 and 8:59, you have to clear within 14 hours. There's an example. So if it stops falling at 7 p.m., they have until 9 a.m. the next morning. And if it stops between 9 p.m. and 6:59, you have to clear by 11 a.m. the next day. We have a flyer on nyc.gov/snow, which has that information on it. And we also have, for our residents, avoid a summons. It's our top 5 summonses for residents. We usually bring it to a lot of our events. You could download it off of our website. And this information is on it as well, because it's one of the top 5 summonses that residents receive. This is just one last note on what to do if they call and give a complaint. Obviously, always reach out to me during a snowstorm. We have folks in our office pretty much 24 hours. If it's planned to get more than, you know, if it's only going to be like 2 inches or so, like potentially Wednesday or Thursday of this week, we'll have folks there a little bit late. But if it's going to be a big storm, we have folks there 24 hours. You can reach out and let me know, but please tell them to call 311, because we do use this information in our after storm reports. We use this information live while the storm is ongoing. And I know a lot of people have lack of faith in the 301 system. So if you tell them, oh, we're not going to divert for your complaint, a lot of times they'll be like, well, what's the point of calling? I've had that in so many meetings. Why should I even call then if you're not going to divert? It really is valuable information. We use it during and after the storm to evaluate our performance, to evaluate areas that might need certain, maybe more equipment, anything to try and make, we take snow as seriously as possible, and we want every snow event to go perfect. So using 311 helps us get to that goal just as efficient and as perfect as possible in our snow response. So we really, really try and reiterate that and hammer it home, which is why, you know, I've said it three times during the presentation. And that is our presentation. So we're happy to take any questions anyone might have, any priority locations you want to flag for us. You know, obviously we also try and get that at these meetings and make sure if there are locations that are high importance, we could the borough chiefs can flag for snow response. So please, we're open to any comments or criticisms anyone might have.
Great, thank you, Nick. And no, you guys relatively did a good job last winter. There were some areas that I want you to pay a little bit more attention to, and that's the public housing developments. So in those specific areas, so Queensbridge houses, Astoria last year were definitely much more problematic than they should have been. So just making sure we pay attention to those. I know NYCHA does on grounds, but I'm talking about the sidewalks and streets leading up to those developments. The other question before I open it up is and this came up last night, we had a borough board meeting. When it comes to the open streets program, how are you coordinating with DOT? With a lot of the dining happening outside and with the sheds and fixtures that are outside on many of these boulevards. So what is your strategy around that? And I'm thinking maybe, I know you have the snow removal program, which the public can apply for employment on. Maybe you may want to think strategically on how you deploy those folks in some of those problematic areas where you're going to have more, sheds on the street. So you just want to speak to that, and then I'll open it. I am happy to hear about the bike lanes too. Cleanup proposal, because that was a big problem last year as well. So just touch on the open streets program and what does coordination with DOT look like ahead of these major storms coming?
Yeah, so I will let one of the chiefs talk a little bit about the actual removal of snow from the open streets, but typically we've coordinated, we have liaisons with DOT that once we know obviously we're getting into a winter weather event, we will send the notification to our liaison at DOT, and then DOT will send it to their open street partners.
And restaurants too. I said open
street.
Yeah,
and any open restaurant participant and open street partners, to let them know that we are going to be in full snow operation. We're going to have to clear that street. Obviously with the structures, we just can't really get to the curb there. We use caution, and we have to plow the street. So there is going to be a little bit of snow that will be up on the right against those structures, but it's really just sort of, not that business as usual, but we are just going to plow down the street and in those open street areas, if they're open restaurants there or not. But again, we do express a lot of caution there. We're not going to be flying down the street trying to ruin their structures or anything like that with the plow. We are using caution on these commercial corridors. We didn't have many incidents last year where any of the open restaurant structures caused, immense obstacles for our operations in those areas. So that's pretty much how it goes with those streets that have been either blocked off for open streets or streets that have open restaurants. And I don't know if anyone of the borough chiefs want to hop in and just note any sort of challenges that you had last year and how we instructed any sanitation workers in terms of removing snow from these areas.
Good morning, Nick. I'll take this one. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. And I love these things that always gets everybody into what we call snow mindset, that Mother Nature actually treated us with a little something for tomorrow, which is the timing of this meeting couldn't have been any better. With that being said, last year was a very successful snow season here in Queens West. We had many activations. For most of you that have been around a long time, you know that we don't just work when it snows. We are effectively deployed and on the ready at any sign of any kind of precipitation in the forecast. So as far as the dining structures go in my borough, we had about 8 weeks of snow training where we went through all the routes when the conditions were hunky-dory, let's call them, very clear, no precipitation or anything to talk of. And we went with our loaded spreaders, our loaded plows, They had the plow, they had the salt, they had everything ready as if it was a regular storm. We went through all the routes, and luckily we didn't come across any obstructions as far as the restaurant outdoor structures were concerned. We do that way when tonight or tomorrow, when it's supposed to start snowing, there are no surprises. We don't anticipate anything of that nature. We do deploy our snow laborers are hired to work with the restaurant owners when it comes to heavy snow. We are very, very careful with our big machines getting through there. We don't want to hurt anybody, obviously, and we don't want to destroy any of their property. We know how valuable that space is to some of these restaurants. But unfortunately, the onus does come on the actual restaurant owners to clear an egress in and around their structure. Of course, we work together with the community very well. We don't want to kill anybody with our snow, God forbid. As far as the snow laborers, we do deploy them to mostly tough locations where we can't get to with our machinery, overpasses and some certain areas around Nitro, of course, and some city-owned buildings. So we do have a good handle on where those are going to be deployed. Queens West here, we're ready. We have 700 sanitation workers working around the clock. We have better than 325 pieces of equipment. We do staff, as Nick alluded to earlier, a smaller population of sanitation workers around the clock during snow plow, in case there are these these last minute unforeseen, which is, by the way, has been very rare in recent years, pop-up storms or snow squalls, and we do pivot to a snow operation. But if you do see some of our collection trucks overnight, it's not an anomaly, it's really happening. We have to give them functions for our sanitation workers to be there in case the snow does pop up. That's all I got right now. I'll be more than happy to answer any more questions. If my colleague Roger from Queens East wants to chime in with his version, I'm going to give the floor to him. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and great seeing everybody. Just like Chief Weatherization said, we identified all the tight streets, all where the restaurants are out 6-8 feet into the curb. We have put them all through the drills, and we could easily get by all of these locations at the moment without imperfect conditions. But even with that, we know that when snow is around, I don't believe outdoor dining usually gets suspended, so there's no one ever inside one of these structures. But it's something that we already have on our routes identified, and on this side of Queens, we have no issues that we know of at the moment. So I'll pass it back to you guys.
Ready, thank you. I think I had a question from Florence, CB1.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President. Happy holidays to you and your staff. Thank you for bringing out some of the situations that were highlighted last year in Community Board 1 Queens. Chief Azara has been very, very responsive, and we have 389 structures in the street alone, not including the structures on the sidewalk. So I did have great concern, and they covered that completely in their presentation. Originally, these structures were supposed to be able to be broken down so that sanitation could go and clean during a snow event. Unfortunately, the structures, I can only speak in my district, have been made more of a permanent nature. So it has caused a bit of a problem. One of my questions was, if indeed we do get a big snowstorm this year, would it be possible on narrow streets narrowed by these structures to use the holsters and then take them to the snow melting stations? That was my first question. And the second question is, will the melting stations for the districts who have them stay in the same places they've been each year traditionally? Thank you.
Good morning, Florence. It's good to see you. Florence and I have worked very closely together for the last 10 years or so. And thank you for saying that we're so responsive. But community leaders have been very fast to let us know whenever there's a problem in the community board. And to me, that is the most important. You guys are the eyes and ears out there. And if you guys bring it to our attention, we will handle it as soon as possible. As far as the snow melters, we are going to be having the snow melters on 50th Street by UPS, like we did last year. That's for those of you who don't know, I believe that's Community Board 2, 50th Street between 55th Avenue and 56th Road. It's been a very successful site. We work closely with the DEP to ensure that their sewer lines are more than adequate for the amount of snow. We basically got it down to a science. Hopefully, we don't have to dust those off this year, even though we did fire them up and make sure they're at the ready. None of us on this caucus really want to see those. That usually means that we had more than a foot of snow. Also, in the past, we've used 19th Avenue over by the DEP facility. That's really our secondary location. If that one is up and running, that means we really got a lot of snow. Hopefully, we don't need to do any one of those. But in case that need arise, we are well versed in melting snow. We do, move it around pretty good on the streets and the tight streets as well. As far as the holsters, the luxury that we have using the holster is that we have the plow that can be moved from left to right. Okay, that doesn't mean we plow to the left. On a general basis, we only really use that lefty plow around something that is going to cause a problem for us. So if there is a very, very tight street and we do have to get very close to the dining structures, we don't have a problem pivoting that plow to the left. Okay, it's done internally inside the actual small machine. And on the bigger plows, a little bit more labor intensive, where we have to actually, drop it and have like a two-man operation. So the answer to that is yes, we don't have a problem doing that. However, we don't like to do it as a general rule, only in certain instances.
Answered your question? Questions? Righty. Any other questions? All right. That means y'all really did a good job last year. All right. All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to our second presentation, and we'll hear from Antoinette Alberti from National Grid. Ms. Alberti is a manager of New York Customer Energy Management Growth and Policy Development. Antoinette has worked in the energy industry since the mid-1990s. She began her career as an attorney, then transitioned to the environmental and design consultant industry. Antoinette ultimately managed the International Energy Initiative for Tetra Tech before starting her own energy efficiency business in the U.S. Caribbean territories. After Hurricanes Maria and Irma, Antoinette joined National Grid. Antoinette will provide us with a briefing on National Grid's recent filing, seeking approval to dramatically expand energy savings programs. These programs will help customers save money, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and will enable National Grid to meet growing customer energy demand safely and reliably on the coldest days of the year, while providing equitable energy benefits to all. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Borough of Queens Jurisdictional Manager, Juan Santiago. Welcome, Juan. Good to see you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Borough President. It's great to see you as well. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much to your staff, district managers, and guests in attendance. I'm joined by, as well as Antoinette, and that was an amazing, introduction that you gave, Mr. Borough President. She's well-versed in what she's doing. All right, I'm joined by Noel Connolly, Christina Maselli, and our leader in government relations, Eileen Safone. So with the winter months approaching, energy efficiency is on everyone's mind. As the days get colder, we're losing heating energy, and this high level overview is just that, and high-level overview on some of the initiatives that we're taking that we've actually placed in the rate case filings based on energy efficiency. A couple of weeks ago, to all of the district managers, I sent out a note to actually get your schedule for the upcoming, community board meetings. That way I can have our subject matter experts actually go into detail with, everything that you're here today. So if you get back to me with your schedule, we'll definitely come back. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Antoinette Alberti.
Thank you so much, Juan. So there is a presentation. So if someone could put up the presentation so we get started. Thank you again for having us here. I'm going to talk today about a filing that we made in October to expand our energy efficiency programs and demand response programs in downstate New York. So let's advance to the slide that has the map of our service territories on it, please. Thanks. So before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge that National Grid not only serves almost 2 million customers in downstate New York, but we also employ 4,600 people. So we are very involved in our communities, both from a service perspective and the fact that so many of our folks actually live in our territories and are our customers as well. So let's move to the next slide. So why are we here talking about a new filing today? On October 4th, we made a filing with the New York Public Service Commission seeking approval to dramatically increase our energy savings programs in downstate New York. And we did this for two reasons. First, we're facing a significant short-term challenge. We have a fundamental obligation and commitment to our customers and communities to ensure that we can safely keep the gas flowing, especially when it's needed most on the coldest days of the year. But we're also thinking long-term as well. New York has some of the most aggressive clean energy and climate goals in the country. And at National Grid, our core vision is to be at the heart of a clean, fair, and affordable energy future. So put simply, how do we do it and where do we get started? Let's go to the next slide, please. A moment ago, I said we were facing a short-term challenge of our supply of natural gas falling short of customer demand for gas during so-called peak demand times, which for us are usually on the coldest days of the year on the gas system. So what you see on the screen right now are our current forecasts of both natural gas supply and customer demand. If you note the little red box, I wish I could show you with my finger. I'm pointing at my screen. That's not going to help, right? If you look into the little red box, you'll see that that's the point on the chart when the customer need is going to become greater than our supply, which could happen as early as next winter season. So we face an urgent shortfall unless we can significantly reduce natural gas peak usage very quickly. So let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So longer term, let me just say that meeting New York's climate goals is not going to be easy for any of us. Not only is the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act among the most ambitious in the world, but we already have some pretty mature energy efficiency programs in New York. So we have to improve on something that's already pretty effective at energy efficiency. Bottom line is, if we want to meet these goals, we're going to need to close the supply gap without building a new pipeline, and we're going to need to go big with new energy efficiency and demand response programs, which brings us to our proposal. So please advance the slides. And we'll go forward a couple of slides, Noel, I think. Thank you. Perfect. So put simply, we propose to enhance our natural gas system and close that supply gap with non-pipeline solutions, in particular with a significant expansion of our weatherization and demand response programs. We've also already begun working with Con Ed and PSEG Long Island to encourage customers thinking of installing natural gas heating to consider energy efficient electric heat pumps instead to slow the demand curve. We believe that we can close 73% of our short-term gap and 100% of our long-term gap by making it possible for our customers to use less natural gas. Let's move to the next slide, please. So while our October 4th filing is new, the ideas that we put into that filing and in this proposal have been developed, debated, scrutinized, and refined over the last few years, both internally and externally through our long-term capacity reports with environmental, business, and community organizations, as well as Department of Public Service staff. And what we're sharing with you today was described in those past discussions, and the Public Service Commission directed us to use a filing such as the one that we just made, our annual demand side management filing, to request permission for these additional programs and funding for those programs in order to help us to address the supply gap. So let's go to the next slide. I want to emphasize just how significant our proposed program expansion is. So what you're seeing on the left side of this chart illustrates how much energy efficiency we have been able to deliver through our existing programs. So we have had some really great growth over the past few years. But if you look at the columns on the right, that's how much natural gas we must save. These levels are really unprecedented. To the best of our knowledge, no other utility in North America has attempted to achieve this level of savings, either in terms of the percentage of customers who are going to participate in the programs or how much gas we need to save with each installation. So this represents a huge shift in how we're thinking about energy efficiency. In the past, it was primarily a nice, environmentally friendly way to help our customers save money on their bills. But today, we're using energy efficiency as a system management tool, and it's one of the most important tools we have at our disposal to ensure we can safely and reliably serve our customers without building new infrastructure. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about some of the program specifics. And at the end, if you have questions, I do have two SMEs, subject matter experts on the line for energy efficiency. I have Enrica Galasso, who is an engineer who works on my team. And for demand response, I have Mona Chandra, who is the manager of the team that designs our demand response programs. So let's take a closer look at our three major proposed program areas and see how they work. First up is weatherization. These programs, built for homeowners, multifamily building owners, and businesses, seek to reduce the need for natural gas heating by significantly reducing heat loss to the outside through insulation and other means. While these can be very big projects, we plan to offer, or we are offering, actually these programs have launched, significant customer benefit or incentives. Customers can receive up to 80% of the cost of their weatherization project, and low-income customers already receive up to 100% of the cost of their weatherization programs through our existing Empower New York and HEAT programs. So we're also putting new technology to work. If you can see on the slide, the thermal image, it's the little black square with, yes, right there. Thank you. We're using personalized heat loss maps for the individual homes in our jurisdictions. So this photo illustrates the energy efficiency of our home, and it will allow us to identify the customers with the greatest energy efficiency needs so we can take extra steps to encourage them to participate in our programs. So essentially what this flyover thermal imagery technology has done is it's shown us which homes are losing the most heat, and those are the customers who could save up to 30% on their energy bills in the wintertime for up to 20 years if they participate in these programs. So the potential, the potential for savings for our customers in these programs are great, in addition to how effective these programs are for reducing peak gas demand on our system on the coldest days. So let's go to the next slide. Our commercial and multifamily weatherization program is similar in many ways to the single family home program. Customers receive significant financial incentives, up to $200,000 in New York City, for weatherization projects that reduce natural gas use. Actual incentives are based upon the amount of gas saved, so I can't tell you how much any particular business may receive. These improvements are similarly long-lived, so they will continue to provide benefits for years to come. And they serve one final benefit too. Improving the insulation and energy efficiency of a building is an important first step toward full building electrification. So let's go to the next slide. So our second category of programs are our demand response programs. These are programs that reduce or shift demand for natural gas at peak times. So our daily demand response program provides larger customers with financial incentives to shut down or significantly reduce their natural gas in the event that the top temperature drops to 10 degrees Fahrenheit or below, and National Grid requests that the customers reduce their gas use or call an event. With our Bring Your Own Thermostat program, customers who own their own smart thermostats can receive financial incentives to allow National Grid to remove or to remotely adjust their thermostat when temperatures drop to be 10 degrees Fahrenheit or below. The National Grid first raises the temperature to preheat the space and then lowers it during peak gas usage, and then returns it to its original temperature after peak. Customers always retain control, so they can override National Grid settings at any time. And then behavioral demand response, and how that works is we send cold weather alerts to residential and small business customers via email, enabling them to voluntarily change the way that they're heating their homes during peak times. So let's go to the next slide, please. Right, the next slide is on electrification of heat. So we have a partnership with Con Ed and PSEG Long Island to encourage the use of electric heat pumps as an alternative to natural gas boilers or furnaces. So what has happened since March of this year is every time someone calls our call center to ask if they can change from delivered fuels to natural gas heating, our call center representatives ask them if they understand what heat pumps are, if they're interested in learning more about heat pumps, and if they are, or even if they aren't, we follow up with that customer with an email sharing with them the link to either the Con Ed or PSEG Long Island programs, and put the customer in possession of information to understand how a heat pump might work in their home and how they can access the existing Con Ed or PSEG Long Island incentives. So let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in summary, we think that the benefits of the programs included in our filing will be extraordinary, especially in relation to their cost. For most customers, implementation of these programs will result in a monthly cost increase of less than 2%. Moreover, these costs are substantially offset by the money we save by not building a new natural gas pipeline or paying for a new natural gas commodity. And customers who avail themselves of these programs, as I pointed out before, could save up to 30% for 20 years. The social and environmental benefits of these programs are significant too. Our proposed programs will support local job growth and provide benefits to disadvantaged communities and keep more of our local energy dollars right here in New York. And of course, we will dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions as we do all of this. So let's move on to one more slide. So, we recognize that as a utility, we can't do this alone. So we're requesting permission to run these programs. But if our customers don't choose to participate in the programs can't succeed. And so that's why we need your help. So the public has the opportunity to comment on our proposal with the Public Service Commission through December 27th. We'd also love it if you could help your constituents to understand why this proposal is so important, how much they can save, and how participating in these programs also helps the natural gas system and the environment. And once we receive approval, we really hope you'll encourage your constituents to take advantage of what promises to be unparalleled incentives and savings opportunities. So some of these programs have launched this year, but the programs will be expanded in future years based upon the Commission's disposition of our proposal. All right. Do you have any questions for us?
Antoinette, before you take questions, Mr. Borough President, I did want to make mention that, our demand response program, we actually had a pilot a few years ago just to see how the program would look and see if there would be any takers. And you'd be happy to know that Left Rack City, right here in the borough of Queens, is one of our biggest customers for demand response program. The savings that they've received during this program with its inception has been astronomical. They swear by it, and it really does work. And I just wanted to add that to bring that into context for the borough of Queens.
Thank you, and a lot more work to be done. And I'm very happy to hear you're trying to shift away from the reliance on natural gas and not solely rely on it, although at this moment, the technologies are not necessarily totally there to sort of convert everybody away from it. But, I updated New York City's air code when I was chairman of the Environmental Protection. And I know we'll be moving away from some of the dirty oils, but obviously natural gas was still left in the bill for that reason, because we still are working on the technology, which brings me to, so I didn't see any geothermal. Are you looking at any other technologies outside of the electric heat pumps, or is geothermal something that National Grid is also entertaining?
No, thanks for that question. So yes, but in this presentation that we gave you, we focused on the new programs that we're asking to fund through heating season 22 and 23. We're actually working very closely with Con Ed and PSEG Long Island, who in New York have the authority to implement our statewide clean heat program. So our heat pump programs, both air source and geothermal on the electric system, so that we can come up with a way to create incentives on top of the incentives that they're providing to make it more effective for our joint customers to convert from natural gas heating to heat pumps, whether they're air source or geothermal. We're also having a non-pipeline alternative solicitation to the market, where I believe that this is going to be released before the end of the year, where National Grid is asking market players to propose projects that may help us to reduce demand. And we anticipate that some of those proposals will include community district heating, like geothermal heating or sewage to district heating, as well as maybe other things that we haven't thought of yet. And so, we're excited to see what the market has to propose for us.
Right. And I would urge you, I think we did a project. I did one of the largest geothermal projects in an affordable housing context in the Rockaways, which was Beach Green Dunes, the largest affordable housing development in the country with geothermal pumps. So that could be something you look to replicate, especially as more development is coming online. And for those of you who don't know about geothermal pumps, the earth can heat and cool your building or your home. So that's a technology that we're piloting, and I certainly had some legislation around it in the council as well. So just want to make sure we keep that also front and centered, as well as the electric heat pumps as well. And then you spoke about conversions. Can you just go into, you're promoting this program when people call, how many conversions have we seen in Queens?
So I don't have that data, but we can follow up with you and let you know how many folks have called for conversions in our KEDNY territory. I don't know that we have it broken up by borough, and how many have expressed interest in a heat pump as part of their decision-making process to decide what they're going to do. We're working with Con Ed right now on whether we can provide live leads. We can't just give customer information, so we have to have customer permissions and the right system set up to take a customer who says that they're interested and actually provide that customer's information to a third party at Con Ed. So right now, what we have been doing is we've just been sending the information to the customer and allowing the customer to make that connection. Once we figure out the best way to do the live leads, then we'll have a better ability to track if those folks who have expressed interest have actually then gone ahead and decided to do a heat pump.
And let me, I look forward to getting my National Grid bill, especially around this time, which is a joke. So do you include this information? And, when I get my envelope, I don't look forward to getting it, quite frankly, but wouldn't it be, or do you provide this sort of information on conversions in the heating bill? And I only say that because when I oversaw DEP, for instance, they had their water I forgot the name of the program. They offer an insurance on your water pipes. So I forgot the name of it, American Water. And one of the things we suggested is that they included information about American Water in bills as well, which they finally did. So that's maybe something useful in sort of getting the word out about these incentives.
That's an excellent idea. I appreciate that. In fact, I'm going to write it down right now. Boom.
And may I add, Mr. Borough President, I opened up by just letting the district managers know that we really want to connect with each community board. So you send me your calendar for the upcoming year, and I have those subject matter experts out there speaking to the community and your constituents.
No problem. Yeah, and let me just last question was just on the weatherization and these specific programs. So you're working with a third party on these? Or so if people want to convert, they can't have their own contractors, right? It would have to be somebody within your system, I'm assuming. Can you just speak to that?
I have Louise on. Louise, do you want to, I apologize. I have Enrica Galasso on. Enrica, do you want to just take that question? Things are a little bit in flux. We want to broaden the number of contractors who can participate. But Enrica, can you just explain where we are now for customers who are currently interested?
Yes. Can you hear me? Just checking.
Yes.
Yep.
Seems like it. So we have, a contractor base currently when we kicked off and soft launched this program back in September. So we're actively growing this contractor network. Our teams were on calls with all of NYSERDA's contractors recently to get them to participate in our program as well. So definitely looking to expand and broaden this, the contractor network. A lot of education and outreach is taking place and going to continue throughout next year to continue to broaden that. But I don't have the exact number of existing contractors we have to date. I can follow up with that and check in with our implementation teams on that. But just wanted to stress the fact that it's something, it's the number one item, I think, for this program that we're currently prioritizing and focusing on, is ensuring that the customers will have, a very large contractor base to fulfill these projects, and flexibility to work with the contractors within the service territory.
Right, and I would hope you're doing outreach to MWBEs, and we would be more than willing to work with you perhaps on making sure we broaden those efforts to make sure, especially MWBEs in Queens who may be capable of doing some of this work, can also benefit from this program as well. So we could talk about that offline, Juan, but we would love to be a part of being helpful in this area as well.
We would also really enjoy that. I think that we're looking at some ways to perhaps switch up the program design so that there may be other ways that contractors can come to us, like, for example, through customers. So yeah, we would really like to continue talking about this. We cannot get to the level of scale we need to get to unless almost all of the contractors are participating. And so we need to find the right way.
All right, perfect. All right, I'm going to go to Florence from CB1, and then following Florence, we'll hear from Marie from CBA.
Thank you, Mr. Borough President. Welcome, National Grid. My district is Community Board 1. We house Con Edison and all of its plants, and I have great concerns going electric so strong, so fast. I know that Con Edison was promoting a split units, where you would get your bill, and if you were getting information, they would, used to be called European split units, where you would your air conditioning and you would also have an electric heat option, and they were giving some kind of a monetary buyback to participate. So, for example, this summer, had anybody in Queens, their air conditioning died, they were going to have this option to install these units, which not only cooled their homes, but electrically heated their homes. Here in Queens, we are getting electric charging stations for the cars. We are encouraging a lot of different kinds of electrical use. We have people during the pandemic using technology more than ever. We've been spoken to with regard to hydropower and wind power, which has not yet come into the district fully and has not materialized. My concern is the electric being supported. I mean, my district had the Green Borealis. It was, national news. I mean, is this something that the system can really handle? I've seen so many glitches and I have concerns.
This is an excellent question. So, first of all, the weatherization portion of our program will help not only with the natural gas winter peak, but will also assist with the cooling summer peak, because it will help to save energy, in the summer and the winter. But when we talk about electrification of heat, one of the reasons you don't see that more than a referral program right now is because we have to work really closely with Con Ed and PSEG Long Island to make sure that as we develop incremental incentives, additional incentives on top of the incentives that we're providing, that we do it in such a way that helps, not hurts their grids. Now, both Con Ed and PSEG Long Island have a concern about the summer peak, less of a concern about the winter peak. So it would take many years of electrifying heat in order to, create a concern in the winter. So in the short term, it helps them to balance their system because they have more usage in the winter. But at some point, we will have to be shoring up the electric system to be able to address the winter peak as well. That's probably, according to Con Ed, not for another 10 years or so. So we have some time for this strategy in the winter. We have to be careful about our electrification plans so that we're not outside of close coordination with the electric utilities, not electrifying other things that could increase the summer peak. And so, we meet weekly with both Con Ed and PSEG Long Island on developing future plans where we can support their electrification plans, but we really have to be in lockstep. It doesn't help to solve a problem on the natural gas system if it creates one on the electric system. Excellent points.
Alrighty, Marie.
Good morning and happy holidays, everyone. My concern has to do with some of our seniors and possible scams. What are you doing to prevent that? And another issue is, are you going to do any PSAs? I mean, in addition to the insert that you would have in the bills and the envelopes, are there any other ways that you're getting the information out aside from coming to the boards, for example?
No, those are both great questions as well. So I'll take the second question first. So far, we have only sent 2 emails, one in our KEDLI territories and one in our KEDNI territories back in September, I believe. And we were so overwhelmed by customers who are interested in these programs that we have not done any other marketing because we can't, we can't continue to market until we build up that contractor network that can satisfy the customers, or else they may lose interest and not move forward with the programs. So right now we are building the contractor network so we can handle the anticipated demand. This is great news. We were concerned that perhaps with the economy or uncertainty during the pandemic that people wouldn't be interested. We really did have a very robust response to just a little bit of marketing so far. So we haven't even sent out those photos of people's homes yet because we know that that's really going to help connect with folks. So as we build those networks, we'll be building out our efforts, and we do believe that we need to do PSAs to explain the larger context. People know that they may be able to save money for their own house, but they may not understand how important participation is also to the gas system and to the environment. And so, on one-to-one sales, you're always talking to customers about what it's going to save them. But in the larger scheme of things, we also want people to understand why it's important beyond just their own bills. With regard to scams, I think that that's something that we'll have to report back to you on our general, our general work that we do to reduce the likelihood of that type of communication happening. One of the things currently in our program is that there are a discrete number of contractors who are participating. That gives us a lot of control on one hand, but on the other hand, it also is limiting in how many customers we can serve. So as we expand the contractor network, this is one of the things that we need to be really careful in our program design that we're thinking about proactively to protect our customers.
In terms of the contractors, would you have an ongoing list of who these contractors are? Something that accessible maybe on your website, or you can share with the community boards. So if someone comes to us and say, well, I have this contractor, he says he's, involved with National Grid and going to do this and this for me. So at least we know that it's a contractor that's reputable and they're actually connected with National Grid. Because we want to be your partner in this to ensure that we're getting this thing done, but at the same token, we're also protecting our residents.
Yes, that list does exist. And after this call, I'll make sure that Juan shares with the larger group a place where you can find out more about these programs, and you can see what the customers can see.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Go to Mark McMillan, TV 13.
Yes, thank you, Borough President. One of the concerns I have is the electricity. Electricity is generated by fossil fuels. So I know we go to electricity for the clean energy, but you need to have more fossil fuels to generate the electricity. That's one of the enigmas when you talk about electric cars. You have to have all of this fossil fuel. Hopefully we get more solar and thermonuclear and all that other stuff. But at this point, by going to electricity, we're just using fossil fuels. So I don't really understand why you would want to move in that direction if we're fighting one fight and creating another fight.
So a couple of things, the current plans, the programs that I just described to you are really focused on energy efficiency. So they're not so much focused on fuel switching, except for referring customers to Con Ed and PSEG Long Island's programs. So our weatherization programs make the building envelope tighter so that gas and electric use, you keep the hot air in the wintertime, you keep the cold air in the summertime. So that is the larger portion of what we're currently proposing. Also, the demand reduction, the DR portions of the proposal are focused on getting people to use less gas during peak time. So giving people incentives to use less gas during those peak times. So most of what we're proposing right now, all of these new programs, are not really focused on electrification. But when we do electrify, those weatherization programs are going to help to reduce the amount of electricity needed to heat or cool the home, because it'll keep the home tight. In terms of the first part of the question, which is, the electric mix, I agree with you. It's going to take some time for New York City to be able to green its electricity mix. And I think that, that's a consideration. But the reason that we're maybe looking to have to do incremental electrification isn't directly the climate. It's that we don't have any more gas to give. And so if we have to continue to hook up new customers, then we have to destroy as much demand as we're bringing onto the system to make room for those new customers. And the only place for them to go is the electric system at this point.
That was my second question, Juan. I'm sorry. No, I know there's a crunch for natural gas around the world, and I know we're against fracking, but you get a lot of natural gas out of fracking as well. So I just wanted to know, and if you could speak to that as well, the shortage of natural gas and how that's going to affect the way we live going forward.
So that is a very big question, and maybe beyond the scope of my ability to respond. I can tell you this, though. The reason that we're having to look at these programs is that National Grid had proposed to purchase capacity on a new natural gas pipeline to New York City, and the permit for that pipeline was denied. In fact, the permits for all of the new pipelines to New York City, have been denied. And so we know that we can't get additional supply through that means. We have, as part of our overall solution, compressed natural gas injection sites on our system, and a proposal to be able to vaporize more LNG at our existing LNG vaporization facility. But that's only going to give us a little bit more gas. And so we know that there's nothing on the horizon beyond those small projects, which will only be a little bit, to bring more gas to New York City. in our territory. So we have to then plan for that future, which is if there's not going to be more gas and we have a duty to serve as a gas utility, how can we continue to serve with a finite amount of gas? And, a lot of that is through demand reduction, energy efficiency and electrification.
Yeah, and I did want to say, Mark, these are unprecedented times, right? Never in the history of the world has so much emphasis been on, moving away from fossil fuels, right? And making the planet greener than it has been now. And rest assured, the National Grid, we have our top engineers and our top scientists finding ways in creating these programs in hopes to slow down these greenhouse gas emissions, right? To eventually come to a point where we do have something sustainable for the future. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have anyone else with questions? Let me sure I didn't miss anyone. Anyone else with questions? All righty, seeing none, I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to thank all of our district managers, of course, the DSNY, National Grid, and of course, the Queens Borough President's Office staff. Thank you all for putting this presentation together, and we look forward to following up on all of the things we discussed today. So have a great holiday. If I don't see you all or speak to you before then, but I'm sure we will. And stay safe, get vaccinated, get